Okay, when I say that Stardew Valley is a waste of time, I'm only being partly honest. Before you get ready with an angry comment though, let me explain. Lately, I started replaying Stardew Valley for the umpteenth time, thinking I'd base my next video on it. But as I continued to play, I really couldn't think of anything to talk about beyond the low-hanging fruit of Stardew's anti-corporation themes. I started to feel guilty for playing, feeling like I was wasting my time even though I was enjoying myself. Then it dawned on me. Why do I feel guilty for that? You may think you know where I'm going with this, but I can almost assure you that you don't. Yeah, sure, you can say that any video game is a waste of time, and then the argument against that is that time enjoyed isn't time wasted. Yada yada yada. I agree with this sentiment, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't really satisfy me or feel like it fully explains why I feel guilty. Now, we could go on and on with speculation here, but I think that there's an important aspect of Stardew Valley and many other cozy games like it that we've been ignoring. There's a lot more going on here because these games are tapping into a major part of the modern human experience. But before we get too far into that, let's look at Stardew Valley for a second. As virtually everyone knows at this point, the game starts with your character leaving a dead-end, soul-crushing office job in order to start a new life on a farm. A trade-off of one type of work for another, of an artificial environment for a more natural one. You spend your days living your life on the farm. You grow crops, fish, mine, slay monsters, discover magical beings. You know, the usual. But let's be clear here, it's still work. And that work is put into the hands of you, the player. You plant and water crops, cut down trees, mine for ore, fight the monsters, go fishing. You take care of everything, and you do basically whatever you can to make money. Oh, you also collect a variety of things to nurture the town's community center back to life, unless, of course, you went with the JoJo route. And here we are at our first important point, the dichotomy between the JoJo route and the community center route of Stardew Valley. And I don't just mean thematically either, I mean in the fundamental differences for how you play each route. See, for the community center, you're given a list of different and specific items to collect and bring to the bundles, while the JoJo route just charges you a flat sum of money for each town upgrade. The community center route will take up a lot of your time no matter what you do. You're either dedicating most of your days to collecting the items that are seasonal, or you're spreading it out over multiple years, steadily completing each bundle. But the only thing that the JoJo route demands of you is something you're already trying to do normally. Make money. And this fits with the themes of both routes. The community center route is meant to put you more in touch with nature and the land around you, but the JoJo route is the heavy capitalistic corporation route. It makes sense thematically for each route to prioritize what they do, but there's more going on here. Right now, the gameplay that you're watching is my current and very first playthrough of going with the JoJo route, and I gotta say, something about it is freeing in a sense, almost as if a weight was lifted from me in comparison to my other playthroughs. And I have played through this game many times. I spent the entirety of this playthrough though just sort of doing what I felt like, making money through however and whatever means I want. I don't have to worry about finding certain crops or fish or forageables, I'm just doing my own thing. And I think that's why this started to feel like I was wasting my time, because with the JoJo route there's less of a focus on productivity, there's less concern for the seasons or the weather. It's almost like that without a constant focus on what I need to be specifically doing, and instead just playing with more of a focus on enjoying the gameplay, my experience began to feel like it was too relaxing. I felt guilty for not being as productive as usual both in the game and out of the game. And this really does fascinate me and at the same time depresses me, because the gameplay loop of Stardew hasn't fundamentally changed. I'm still doing all the same basic things as before, just with a different mindset. Strictly speaking, as far as gameplay loops go, I should feel pretty similarly about doing the JoJo route when compared to the community center. But the community center provided a checklist for me, and each item I brought, each bundle I completed, each room I restored provided me with a sense of satisfaction. a hit of dopamine, and a feeling of achievement. The JoJo route lacks all of this though. I believe that the reason it feels so lackluster is just because it's really less work. And with less work comes a feeling of less productivity. But I'm still unsure as to why I would feel the need to be more productive in a video game, especially whenever the end result is so fundamentally similar. Truthfully, I believe that this stems from a sense of I haven't earned the right to relaxation. The work that I was putting into the game was less compared to other times I've played, and thus, somewhere deep inside, I don't feel like I'm playing the game correctly, even though what I'm doing is a valid way to play. But why would Stardew of all games lead me to feel this way? What about it makes it different from the majority of other games? I mean, for a lot of people, it's considered a cozy game, and yes, I know that's controversial. You can argue amongst yourselves in the comments. So what exactly is going on here? To answer all of these questions, we need to shift gears for a moment and talk about two things: our modern work culture and how that's led to the rise of cozy games as a genre. Because when it comes to Stardew Valley, the entire game makes no sense without a fundamental understanding of what exactly is going on in the world today when it comes to work. Let's define some terms real quick though. For the rest of this video, I'll be referring to both quote-unquote work and quote-unquote play in a slightly different context than you're probably used to. Work is typically characterized by external motivation, usually being a requirement to live in modern society, and in the modern world, it has a tendency to be a burden. For play, I'll be using Dr. Peter Gray's definition. It's self-chosen, self-directed, imaginative or creative, and it's intrinsically motivated, done with an active and alert frame of mind, and not a distressed one. Most adults in our modern world are working 40 hours or more a week, but that's not all. Even if you work only 40 hours, which is full-time, at least in most of America, you're still spending time actually getting ready for work, commuting to and from, and then de-stressing from it as well. Those 8 hours a day can very easily become 10 hours a day, and that's assuming that 40 hours is enough for you to live off of too. Some people have multiple jobs or have to work overtime. These people will find themselves with little to no free time, and any free time they do have is being used to take care of other types of work. Even full-time workers who are only doing about 40 hours a week are still spending a lot of their days taking care of basic household chores. Laundry, cleaning, yard work, car maintenance, budgeting, cooking. It's easy to overlook those things, but when you break down the number of hours in the week, they start to add up fast. The thing about work is that under the best circumstances, humans tend to crave it. Meaningful work is a term used to describe work that is fulfilling and provides a sense of purpose. Think of your dream job, for instance, and the joy it would bring you. Working because you want to, not because you need to. It also helps that the more effort we put into something, the more satisfied we tend to be with it. This is in part due to dopamine, as it's released when we achieve rewards and also motivates us to continue. This all explains why work exists at all, at least in the manner that it does today, and why both work and gaming are something we strive to do even when unpaid, like with volunteering, or like this video that you're watching right now. I have no way of making money from this at the time of recording, but making this video is still a form of work, and it's meaningful and satisfying for me to do. Now, the traditional paid job and 40-hour work week stems from societal expectations. High work ethic is seen as a positive trait in many cultures, and in many places there is a gap between the motivations for working between higher and lower class people. Higher class individuals are more likely to work for the sake of satisfaction and gratification, but the lower you go, the more work and the number of hours you work becomes a necessity, a requirement to continue living. For many of us, this explains why our standard 40-hour paid work week is not fulfilling. Because the work itself has no meaning, it's not meaningful, and the rewards given, like money and benefits, are not enough in and of themselves to make us find meaning in the work that we're doing. Because the more you work and the less fulfilling that work is, the more problems you'll face both psychologically and physically as stress takes a toll on you. Working more hours also leaves less time to rest, sleep, and maintain a work-life balance, which continues to build upon psychological and physical health issues. Nowadays, many of us live in a world where work is just like this. It's unfulfilling, stressful, and can deteriorate our lives and relationships that exist outside of it. But it wasn't always like this. Many decades ago, we were still working, but there was more time. Things moved slowly. People would play games and drink alcohol and socialize. They would all have enough time to recover from working. And being able to recover is necessary to maintain productivity. In fact, numerous studies have shown just how necessary this recovery process is, but many people simply don't have the luxury to experience that as much as they should. This is pretty terrible because you need to be able to recover to work and be productive. Otherwise, you'll experience burnout or depression or anxiety, or a number of physical health problems, like an increased risk of heart attack or stroke. You might not just lose your job, you might lose your life. Modern work culture is therefore one of constant movement. 40-hour work weeks, overtime, and even working multiple jobs have become the norm for a lot of people, especially as the cost of living rises with wages stagnating. Ramifications of this play out in poorer health, worsening relationships, and a growing need for escapism, like playing video games, for instance. Ironically, for being a game with themes about rejecting modernity, Stardew Valley showcases this aspect of the daily grind pretty well in its gameplay mechanics. You always want to be making the most of your time, switching between the farming, the fishing, the mining, the fighting. And if your character runs out of energy, you either eat something or you make yourself sleep, giving yourself time to recover. I mean, heck, you can even go into the spa, the sauna, pool, whatever it is, to rest and recover slowly over time. I feel like there was another time, though, just a little recently, where things slowed down and work began to cease. We all found ourselves with a lot of free time. Oh, yeah, that's right. The pandemic. Okay, this may seem off topic, but I promise you it isn't. And yeah, 5 years later, I'm finding another way to bring it up, and I would say I'm beating a dead horse, but this is the first time I've ever mentioned it in a video. Anyway, with the COVID-19 pandemic came the cessation of work for a lot of people, and for a lot of other people, it came with work from home, which still freed up a fair amount of their time. Not to mention stimulus checks and also the fact that people couldn't be evicted for not paying rent. Simultaneously though, these quote-unquote cozy games that have existed for decades now, especially in the forms of Animal Crossing, The Sims, Harvest Moon, etc., started seeing a large uptick in demand for them compared to recent years. Is this because of the pandemic? Gaming becoming a more common hobby? Well, the answer is complicated, so to start off, let's get a more concrete definition of this somewhat nebulous concept. A cursory glance of a variety of internet forums show us that the baseline for a cozy game is that they can't be too stressful. Games that let you play at your own pace and don't require quick thinking or reflexes will fall into this. Secondly, cozy games tend to have their own aesthetic, tending to go for softer and/or cuter graphics. Of course, no exact definition is available for this, and even a game like Stardew Valley can be debated on whether or not it qualifies due to the time management and more intense mind sections of the game. Nonetheless, this gives us a good idea of what to consider for the rest of this video, because the underlying themes of a lot of these traditionally cozy games provides an insight into exactly why they are gaining so much traction. The first widespread usage of the term cozy games actually started around the time of the pandemic, and now I think you can see where the threads are converging. You can see with a little bit of Googling and Google Trends that cozy games as a search term began to achieve popularity around 2021, steadily increasing in popularity over the last several years. The pandemic caused a lot of big feelings for people, a lot of stress with not much to do to avoid it, and so cozy games became that much more popular of a relaxing outlet, while simultaneously allowing us to feel more productive. To be specific, this productivity takes the form of the in-game activities. Animal Crossing New Horizons had the fortunate timing of releasing right before the pandemic went into full swing. For many people during this time, this game provided a consistent break, allowing them to perform virtual chores on a daily basis, almost like the equivalent of a digital Zen garden if you think about it. The rise of cozy games comes at a time where more and more people are prioritizing their mental health and relaxation, and that certainly plays a large role in their increasing popularity. Cozy games usually feature pleasant visuals, the relaxing ambience, and charming soundtracks, which all invoke something known as hygie. Hold on, let me look up how to pronounce this real quick. Hygge. Okay, cool. This word comes from Danish and is a little difficult to describe in English, but it effectively means a coziness that allows someone to feel both content and comfortable. This is what we're talking about on the surface for how cozy games make us feel. They create an atmosphere of coziness. But as I mentioned, cozy games help us feel productive, and I don't think it's a coincidence that many of these games are capitalistic in nature. Whether it's Stardew Valley, Dave the Diver, Animal Crossing, Rune Factory, My Time at Portia, Harvest Moon, Coral Island, Wildflower, and more, several cozy games have some emphasis on making money or running a business or some other form of capitalism. Now, not all cozy games are like this, but it is interesting that this is a common enough theme amongst many of the more popular ones within the genre. This goes all the way back to the fact that we crave productivity and meaningful work, and that's the fantasy that's being sold to us with these games. The productive aspects of them that allow us to create profit and complete various minor tasks at our own leisure, with little holding us back and few to no consequences for failing, are why these are cozy games. We have essentially found a type of play that allows us to simulate meaningful work in a form that we don't get to experience in reality. We're able to create, earn the fictional money, build communities, all in a way that brings us a sense of satisfaction, a sense of hygge, a sense of coziness. And this is because cozy games aren't attacking capitalism, but rather the societal pressure that modern work and capitalism have created, while still being part of the capitalistic framework. Look no further than our very own Stardew Valley, a game where selling crops and other things is your main priority, but is still narratively antagonistic to corporations in the form of critiquing Joja. Cozy games are so prominent nowadays because our modern work culture, as we've already established, has continuously left more and more people overworked with less meaningful work, creating a yearning for a space where we can engage with capitalism in a way that does provide fulfillment. This is about half of the reason why I feel guilty playing the Joja route, because it removes many of the meaningful aspects of the community center route. I'm no longer wasting my time in as much of a meaningful way, and it doesn't feel near as productive. By this point though, we're still missing part of the equation, as there's more to both work and these games than them feeling meaningful. We still don't fully understand why these games allow us to feel productive, nor why that productivity needs to exist to alleviate the guilt I feel around relaxing and playing. The capitalistic aspect of these games is extremely important to why they allow us to feel productive and meaningful in the first place. But we need to address the psychology of both capitalism and, therefore, these gameplay loops. I feel like I shouldn't have to explain this, but I will anyway. Capitalism is an economic system where private individuals and companies own the means of production and property with the goal of obtaining a profit. The means of production are simply what you need to make goods, like resources and factories. Look, to be totally honest with you, this is outside of my wheelhouse, and it is far more complicated than what I'm explaining here, and I'm sure there's much more knowledgeable people that can comment on this video explaining in much more detail how capitalism works. But this is the basic understanding of capitalism that we are going to be using for this video. The psychology behind capitalism can explain a lot about why we find ourselves engaging with it so passionately, to the point of the detriment of our own health. The most interesting part is, at least to me, is that the psychological phenomenon behind capitalism has a large amount of overlap with why video games are so enjoyable and occasionally addictive. First and foremost, there isn't much research out there looking at the psychology of capitalism, and the reasons for that are complicated, but we do know how capitalism shapes cultures. Since the system focuses on amassing wealth, competitiveness and individualism become valued traits throughout a capitalist society. This is why we see these traits primarily in the West, which has had capitalism as its primary economic system for at least a few hundred years, instead of the eastern part of the world, which hasn't been quite as capitalistic historically, and instead leans towards more collectivistic societies. Of course, we are talking again historically, as many Eastern societies nowadays are in fact much more capitalistic than they were only 100 years ago. Okay, hi, editing me here. I wanted to mention that I'm specifically referring to free market capitalism whenever I'm referring to capitalism here. That's the type of capitalism that we mostly see in the West, versus a more authoritarian type of capitalism that we see in the East. The free market capitalism is what lends itself to individualism, while capitalism, whenever it's more controlled by the government, like we tend to see in Eastern countries, especially historically, is what tends to be lending itself to a more collectivistic society. So whenever I'm referring to capitalism here, I'm referring to free market capitalism. That's because capitalism is a global phenomenon now, with most societies adopting it in some form, albeit adapted to make sense for local customs, values, etc. Again, a lot more to it than that. That's all we need to know for this video. Before we go any further, I want it to be known that this is not meant to be some political hot take, as I have absolutely no intention of making any of my opinions known. My goal here is to provide factual information and evidence. This is not a promotion or dismissal of capitalism, just observations. You can make and have your own opinions, you can argue about it in the comments, but everything is subject to criticism. It should be noted that economic systems have a heavy influence on culture and therefore our own psychological processes. Capitalism's emphasis on profit causes us to associate wealth with achievement, and thus tie our own value to it. Our own wealth and career success becomes a priority, a requirement to reach self-actualization, or the realization and fulfillment of our full potential. The free and competitive market encourages us to be competitive and adversarial amongst each other, and it's been shown that competitively pursuing financial success increases anxiety, reduces happiness, and causes dissatisfaction. This goes back to our previous points, that work for the sake of financial gain causes problems, while work that is meaningful in and of itself is fulfilling. The owning of property leads to higher possessiveness and individualism. This is apparent whenever we look at research of how we actually treat objects. Our possessions are nostalgic and hold memories for us, reinforcing our own identities and simultaneously act as symbols for our own self by reflecting our core values and uniqueness. More simply, what you have and own often represents you as a person. Like how owning an electric car and solar panels would align with someone who is more environmentally conscious. And as we look closer at how capitalism affects us on the personal level, we're brought to where it and video games heavily overlap. A really simple thing called operant conditioning. It's an old concept, but a relevant one. It was originally proposed by Edward Thorndike and further developed by B.F. Skinner. It is a complicated idea that is summed up in a very simple way. When what you do leads to good outcomes, you're more likely to keep doing that thing. When what you do leads to bad outcomes, you're less likely to keep doing that thing. At the core of operant conditioning is reinforcements and punishments, with each being positive or negative. In this context, positive refers to a stimulus being added, while negative refers to it being removed. Not necessarily quote-unquote good or quote-unquote bad. For example, let's say you show up late for work and your boss docks your pay. This is a negative punishment, as your pay was removed, making it negative, and it was the intent of preventing this behavior in the future, making it a punishment. Another example would be if you gave someone a loved gift in Stardew Valley, and you receive another heart in your relationship with them, as well as some positive dialogue. This is a positive reinforcement, as the dialogue and heart represent something being added, and this is to encourage you to keep giving loved gifts, making it a reinforcement. Are you starting to see where this is going? We are encouraged to work and make money in the same way we are when we play many of these games. Our behaviors are reinforced or punished based on how much money we make, how productive we are, and how hard we work. But the difference between a game like Stardew Valley and real work is that in Stardew, there is no punishment. You do not suffer at all from not making money. You are in no way punished for not working fast enough. At most, all you have to do is wait until the next season if you miss something. Everything can wait or be reversed, and there is no negative consequences, unless you turn your kids into doves a lot, but you get it. Whereas in our current work culture, it seems like there is only punishment. It has become increasingly harder to earn promotions or raises, making your only form of reinforcement your own paycheck. Should you make a mistake, you can be fired. In many states within the US, there are laws known as at-will employment, which allows employers to terminate employees for nearly any reason. If you're not fired, you may have your pay cut, hours reduced, demotion, or just given a verbal or written warning. This creates a world where working harder doesn't always correlate to success, and making any mistake can cost you everything. Compare this to our favorite cozy games, and it's immediately apparent as to why they are so beloved. There is little fear of failure. There's no game over for running out of money, no homelessness if you're not profitable enough, no punishment if you need to take your time. You're allowed to be productive at whatever pace you want, put in however much effort you want, and receive rewards that correlate with it. And this is without taking into consideration the dopamine aspect of operant conditioning. For the uninitiated, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that, among other things, is responsible for the reward part of your brain. It's what allows you to feel pleasure and plays a big role in reinforcement. Our brains really, really want dopamine, and you'll be motivated to do whatever you're supposed to do to receive it. Whenever behavior becomes associated with a reward, dopamine is part of the reason you keep wanting to perform that behavior, meaning both capitalism and video games, including these cozy games, are feeding off of this dopamine loop. So, effectively, with my own Stardew playthrough, I had been conditioned to get the rewards and dopamine associated with completing the community center bundles. Without that, just purchasing the bundles with Joja felt empty and less productive, because I was no longer doing the same behaviors to reach my rewards. No wonder it felt like I was wasting my time. There was no more meaningful work, less dopamine, less behaviors that would lead to rewards. The Joja route freed me to the point where I saw just how much time I was wasting while playing video games, since I was no longer feeling fulfilled or productive. And when brought to the context of cozy games as a whole, you may be feeling like they're all just a sad form of escapism, a journey to another world where work isn't stressful, where labor is a form of play, where things can actually feel meaningful, where we're allowed to be productive at our own pace, a critique of our modern world by showing how the system can actually be rewarding instead of punishing. Don't get me wrong, these games do represent that, but I think it's a good thing that they do. We need to play these games. We need to experience that meaningful work and faux productivity. We need to waste our time, because they represent what we're already striving for, and without them, we won't have the rest, relaxation, and satisfaction that comes from play. My guilt was a byproduct of our current world, where productivity is valued above nearly all else. Stardew Valley and other cozy games have risen in popularity thanks to their ability to give us an alternate perspective, a world where you aren't punished for not being 100% productive all the time, where the work you do feels meaningful. These games show us what we truly desire for our own lives, but even more importantly, they allow us to simply play. And ultimately, we need to play and find meaningful work if our own work isn't meaningful. Research shows that play is extremely beneficial to adult mental health, and it provides a form of rest and relaxation. This may seem obvious, but it can be easy to forget with all the struggles we face on a day-to-day basis. Additionally, over the last few years, we've seen increases in stress and several mental health disorders, especially among young adults. Our current work culture encourages us to constantly be moving, without taking any time to rest. But play allows us to relieve the stress. It improves our emotional intelligence and resilience. In a world where meaningful work is rare and productivity is encouraged to often unhealthy degrees, play becomes a way we keep ourselves sane. And so cozy games become our preferred form of play. They allow us to embrace a meaningless pastime and find our own meaning within it. They allow us to engage productivity at our own pace. They give us a choice in how we work and how we engage with capitalism as a whole. Wasting our time becomes a positive thing. It allows us to experience a more idealized version of our own lives. We can feel productive and engage with a system that actually values our time, instead of making us feel guilty for wasting it. Stardew Valley shows us that productivity doesn't have to be the only virtue. You're encouraged to do things, sure, but nothing in the game itself tells you that there's a time limit, except for when that time limit is optional. You still have to manage the time you spend during each day, but that's not work, that's just part of life. If you wanted to spend your entire day in Stardew sitting on a bench, you very well can. Nothing bad will happen to you if you do that. Even if you pass out there, you might be billed and lose some items, but that's it. Heck, if you don't have any money, it's not like you go into debt either. The charges are just waived. Many of you may try to heavily optimize your Stardew playthroughs, but you don't even have to do that for 99% of the content in the game. Even the optimization is presented as a choice, and all of these choices are antithetical to the real world. You don't get punished. The world is patient, a luxury that we don't get very often now. We're able to reclaim the time that we have, but instead of focusing on productivity and labor, we get to focus on the joy and meaning of the work that we do while playing. And the best part is, the fact that we need to play to relax and rest in order to be productive with our less than meaningful work means that no one should feel guilty about doing this. We get to make our own meaning through playing and resting. By wasting our time, we're still prioritizing our productivity, but we also get to make a choice in what we find joy and satisfaction in. We get to choose where our meaning comes from, because if our culture and society won't provide work that is meaningful, we have to find it and make it ourselves. So, yeah, Stardew Valley and other cozy games are wastes of time, and to me that's an amazing thing. The ability to waste our time but still find meaning and joy and a sense of satisfaction from being productive is something we don't get to see very often in the modern world, and the fact that we can do it through these games is something beautiful. We reclaim something that's been lost while we play, something that we're all desperate for but don't have the words to explain all the time. I'm lucky that with each of these videos I'm able to find some meaning in the work I do, even if there's no profit involved. And for many others, the work and play of video games can give them some other form of meaning too. So I encourage you, dear viewer, to find ways to waste your time that can give you that sense of satisfaction and meaning. Because at the end of the day, that's all that most of us can really do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about your favorite way to waste your time. Until next time, this has been Cognizant Pixels. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.